So I told you that the secret to the iconic sounds of the Neptunes, Tame Impala, and Timbaland was all centered around the same thing. And that one thing is rhythm, or kind of the feeling that the rhythm is able to create groove. And they all have different ways in which they go about creating that groove.
I think people think I'm kind of joking when I say I spend 90% of my time on drums when I'm working on a song, but it's dead true. It's like me chasing the dragon, you know?
So when I first heard that, that was really surprising to me, just because if you listen to his music, you hear really cool bass lines, synthesizers, guitars, etc. But one of the ways he actually likes to go about creating a groove with his drums is playing his hi-hat on the offbeat. So if he was playing his hi-hat on the on-beat, we just take this really simple drum loop. This is what it would sound like. Really basic, sounds cool, but not a ton going on. But if we go to the second drum loop, where the hi-hat's just all on the offbeat, keeps it really interesting. Now, if we combine the two and put some of the hi-hats on the on-beat, then you get a really cool and nice, interesting groove. And if you like those drum sounds I was using, those are all just from my drum kit demo. Now, because that's a really basic loop, if we wanted to go in and enhance it a bit, we can use some techniques from Timbaland, who is just known for having some of the most insane drums of all time. But there's one thing that we have to keep in mind.
I think simplicity is the key. You don't need a lot. You don't want to clutter the song. Yeah. You want to add ear candy to the song, but you don't want to overpower the song.
Now, the first thing Timbaland would do in order to kind of add to his drums and keep them more interesting would be to add some contrast. And the best way to do that is just kind of layering your drum over another drum. So for example, if we take right here, I just have the snare being layered over this beat right here, but then not on this next one, then layered over, and the pattern just kind of repeats. So just kind of listen to how it kind of affects the overall bounce, but the groove kind of stays the same. It's just enhanced a bit. So really the hi-hat is almost kind of pumping a little bit, because on one beat it's hitting harder than the other. Now, another thing Timbaland would do is add really unique and interesting sounds. And the great thing about him doing this is, you know, it sounded cool, but also it just makes things sound more unique and interesting. Like, he would use his voice, different sounds he heard on the streets. He would take little samples and whatnot. But right here, I just have two sounds from my drum kit. This install sound, which just, you know, sounds like that, and then this little tape sound. So if we just add these sounds in a few spots, it really kind of enhances the groove. And also, I'm aware this sounds nothing like a Timbaland beat, but I'm just trying to kind of show you guys how you can apply any of these tips to any style of music. This is just kind of the vibe I'm into at the moment. And then the next thing he did, which he mentioned, was adding ear candy.
You want to add ear candy to the song, but you don't want to overpower the song.
And basically what that is stuff that kind of pushes the groove forward, but it's not the focal point of the groove. It's something that you probably wouldn't even really notice unless you were really kind of paying attention. So to do that, I just added this shaker and this snap right here, and they kind of just going in a roll. It's almost kind of like a little roll. And then the last thing that Timbaland did to enhance his groove was kind of programming these drums in by hand. You can use like a MIDI keyboard if you want here. Some other options, at least in FL, is you can add some swing with this knob right here, which I ended up doing. And you can also just click on any of these sounds. And if you click this record button here, you can just press record and just tapping the sound that way as well, which just gives it like a very real and kind of natural feeling. But obviously, as you can see here, I was too lazy to do that. Now onto the Neptunes. And like Tame Impala and Timbaland, they also had some very iconic drum grooves and just drum bounces in general. However, one thing that really stands out to me about their production is how they lay down their bass lines and their chords. And they did that by having syncopated chords as well as their bass line notes. So we take this very simple pattern of a bass line right here and chords. You know, it sounds pretty cool, but what the Neptunes would do is they would take it a step further by adding tons of movement and kind of just having them bounce off each other, which if we look at this chord progression and bass line, all the root notes of the chords are kind of just being played exactly on pace with the chords, and there's not really too much rhythm going on. Now if we take this second example right here, this is where things start to get more Neptunes like and interesting. And again, this is not going to sound like the Neptunes. This is kind of just my style using some of their tricks. So if we look here and we look at these chords being played and this bass line right here, it's not going on all of the same notes. Like right here, I added an extra D for some rhythm and bounce, this A right here, and that's going to just make it sound a lot more interesting and have a way better groove. So let's give this a listen. Just way more interesting. And then if we, you know, throw some chords on it and then a super simple drum loop, it still has an amazing groove. The next video I would recommend watching is this one right here.